Good morning and welcome to Central Florida Retail Outlook webinar. How are Central Florida markets responding to COVID-19? I'm Scott France, president of France Media and co-publisher of Shopping Center Business and Southeast Real Estate Business. First, I would like to thank our sponsors who are the ones that have made this webinar possible, and they include InvenTrust Property Management, Crossman & Company, SRS Real Estate Partners, Franklin Street, and Downtown Orlando. This morning, you're going to hear from an amazing and very knowledgeable group of retail experts that include Ivy Greaner of InvenTrust Property Management, Cindy Schuler of SRS Real Estate Partners, Ralph Conti of RaCo Real Estate Advisors, Kurt Keaton of Franklin Street, and Chuck Whittall of Unicorp National Developments. And moderating is the one and only Beth Azor of Azor Advisory Services. At this time, I'd like to turn the panel over to Beth, who will take it away. Enjoy the webinar and thank you for listening.
Thank you, Scott. I want to welcome our wonderful panel, and what I would like to do to start is they will introduce themselves quickly so that we can get into the meat of the material. Cindy, please introduce yourself.
Good morning, everybody. Cindy Schooler with SRS Real Estate Partners, Managing Director of the Orlando and Tampa offices. Is that quick enough, Beth?
Yes, perfect, Cindy.
Okay.
Kurt,
All right.
You're next.
Good morning. Great to see everyone. I'm Kurt Keaton. I'm president of Real Estate Services for Franklin Street.
All right. Ivy.
Hi, I'm Ivy Greaner. I am the Chief Operating Officer for InvenTrust.
Chuck, you might have to take off that mask.
I took off my mask. Chuck Whittall with Unicorp National Developments, president of the company. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning. Last but not least, Ralph.
Good morning, everyone. Ralph Conti with RaCo Real Estate Advisors here in Atlanta, Georgia.
So thanks to our wonderful speakers for being here so we can share some of their wisdom with you all today. Cindy, we're going to start with you. Share with us the different retailers and restaurants that are open and closed now and in the Central Florida market. And when do you anticipate full reopening in the Central Florida markets?
Well, we, like most counties in Florida, are in phase 2 right now, which is basically 50% of most retail and restaurant operators, and they're at limited capacity. They're at 50% indoor dining, they're at 50% capacity for their square footage from a retail perspective. So we're open. We're getting there. It's a climb. You know, when you go from 100% to 50%, there's all kinds of business models that have to be adjusted. Phase 2 did not allow for nightclubs to be open, so they are the outlier right now. But beyond that, pretty much everybody is open if they choose. And I think that's a really important point, especially with regards to the tourist district. There are some challenges with businesses opening with a reduced capacity, with a reduced traffic flow to the parks. So some of this is just being driven by business decisions and not so much what the government is allowing us to do. It's a matter of whether they can get to a financial position that makes sense for them to open. So, you know, we're taking it day by day, month by month. Every time we have a holiday, we have to watch what happens, because that's a good thing. More people come to our, wonderful city, but it does bring its own challenges on what the after effect could have on restaurants and hotels and businesses.
Definitely, with Labor Day coming up this weekend, I think we're all a little concerned about the 2-week hangover we might have after that. Kurt, what restrictions do you see that retailers and consumers are taking as far as staff safety and safety in the restaurants, safety in the surrounding areas?
Yes, well, as Cindy said, really starting at the highest levels with the CDC guidelines, and then where the state of Florida continues to remain in phase 2. Obviously, each city and each county, we notice across Central Florida, there are some differences there following their individual mandates. But by and large, what we're seeing is higher cleaning standards to a disinfectant level, typically with the restaurants and now the theaters and the entertainment venues at a 50% indoor capacity. A lot of additional signage, a lot of additional one-way traffic signage, entry and exit signage, those sorts of things. Outside seating is more prevalent. You know, we've seen on the landlord and the property management side some adjustments in the parking to work with tenants to allow curbside pickup or curbside delivery. So those sorts of things are much more prevalent right now. But as Cindy said, I think the best news for us has continued to be we're open for business, even in limited capacity in some instances, pretty much across all of Central Florida.
Phenomenal. Ivy, what do you think, how are property owners and managers, property managers adapting, and how are they trying to help their tenants?
Well, I think most landlords have similar strategies. Obviously, there's differences for each one. Whether or not you are helping your tenants with deferral, whether or not there's rent abatement, whether or not you're being creative. This is very different than our last downturn when we're very category focused because of shutdowns. People can't open, they can't operate at full capacity. And then some people are operating, you know, at full capacity and blowing the doors off. So it's very much about category type. And so those, you know, we in particular are helping our tenants by considering deferrals and in some cases abatements and or percentage rent to help people get to the next place as they are navigating all of that.
Challenging times. Chuck, are you guys also doing some abatements and deferrals, and how are you thinking this will impact the property values and for how long?
Well, we've done abatements, we've done deferrals. Every tenant, I think everybody would agree, is unique. You know, there's certain tenants, fast food restaurants and Publix and grocers that you don't need to do anything with. They're doing very well. You get a dance studio or a karate studio, they need help and you got to abate their rent because they're not going to be able to pay you back in the future. So everybody's unique. You know, we've seen our collections go from probably in April in May from 65 to 70%. We're back in the 90s now. So we're doing well there. Hospitality industry is devastated. Nobody's really talking about that, but the hotels are going to continue to suffer until the vaccine comes out. A lot of the hotels in the International Drive area are just flat out closed. Everybody's running very low occupancies at 15 to 20%. We're just not going to have the business. People aren't going to travel on airplanes and they're not going to come here and go to conventions and go to theme parks until there's a vaccine. I heard Cindy and Ivy talking about the percentages of the restaurants. My personal opinion, being on the reopening task force, is that we're going to stay at 50% capacity, unfortunately, until the vaccine comes out. I don't think we will go into the next stage. It's my personal opinion. We will discuss that on the opening task force calls. But I just feel that we're within a couple of months of the vaccine being administered. You guys may know that Orange County has been part of the testing. They've actually administered the vaccine in Orange County, Florida. So it's been administered here and it's in the final phase of testing. So that's encouraging. As far as property values, we won't transact in a time like this. I really don't see property values being hurt right now. We're not selling right now, nor would we in a time of a recession period. You know, what I think is going to happen is I actually think property values will go up next year because there's going to be a lack of supply. A lot of developers have pulled back. We've actually done the opposite. We're going forward doing a lot of deals, but I think there's going to be a lack of supply and there's going to be low debt. The interest rates will stay down. So I think the demand will actually go up next year, which will drive values better. That's what we're expecting will happen toward the end of 2021, going into 2022.
Chuck, do you hear all of the audience screaming and jumping up and down from that comment?
You know, I track it a lot. I've personally invested in Moderna and AstraZeneca, and I follow. I know where they're at, and FDA is doing a review in October, and it would not surprise me if the vaccine's out in November or December. And I know if you read about Moderna, who is the U.S. government's bought already 500 million doses from Moderna in advance. And if they don't have it all produced and ready to administer in January, they get penalized. So I think it's sooner than later. I think we will get back to living normal. The term social distancing, that's not who we are as a country, as a people. People want to get together. They want to congregate. I mentioned before we started that I was in Laguna Beach last week in California, and the pool was, I took a picture. It was like 4th of July with no COVID. And people want to get back to normal, and I think we will get back to normal. You hear the term, this is the new norm. This is, to me, the temporary abnorm. We will go back to normal next year. People will take the vaccine, and we'll say, gee, COVID was the turd in the 2020 punch bowl. So that's where I think we're going to. That's my personal opinion.
Thank you. So Ralph, so Chuck just said a lot of developers are pulling back or stopping. Chuck's moving forward. What are you seeing on development as the representative, one of the representative developers on the panel? Are developments going forward, and what's happening with properties that were mid-development when all of this came down?
Really great question, and I guess from my perspective, it really depends on where you sit in the development fold. I've been involved in the real estate industry since the mid-1970s. I've seen a number of recessions, as most of the people on this panel, and every recession impacts the real estate industry in a slightly different way. I can tell you that the project that I'm working on in Gainesville, Celebration Point, been working on that thing since coming out of the Great Recession. And it's taken a long time to put together. We're mid-development right now. We're a property that's about 50% open and still have to finish another phase, which we're about to launch. It really depends. I mean, before I started my company in 2009, I was in corporate real estate with the likes of like Kimco and DDR and Homart, and I remember when I was with DDR, we were going strong. The recession of 90, 91 didn't hurt us at all because we were flush with cash and we were able to buy into deals where local developers were suffering. So, if you're sitting in the big corporate real estate with flush with cash, you're going to weather pretty much any storm. But if you're a small local developer who does one-off deals, or maybe you just focused in a particular local market, you're going to struggle probably for a while. So it's a cash-intensive business. But notwithstanding that, it depends on what you develop. So I've been mostly retail my whole life, although the last 15, 20 years it's been mixed use, and it's almost all mixed use now. You have to diverse and you have to be able to withstand. So I think developers are really good at adapting to different things. And if you don't adapt, you won't survive. So that's sort of my view on it.
And in your development, are you working, have you seen a shift, or are you adapting with a shift, thinking what's the national expansion play as far as the retailers are going with them not being able to travel? Are you seeing a slow up on the national retailers moving forward with real estate committees, et cetera? And, or are you focusing on any multi-locational regional players, or are you is your development far enough out that when nationals can start traveling again, national retailers, you're good to go because your project is a year or two out?
Well, I can only speak for, the project I'm working on. And what I'm seeing, I'm actually working on two projects right now that are out of the ground. One's in Atlanta and one's in Gainesville, Florida. They're very intense on multifamily. So, there's a mix of uses. There's some hospitality. That business is taking a scud missile right now, and it's on the sidelines. Multifamily is the soup du jour. Who knows, when that'll change. I remember when the condo business was the soup du jour, and then that took a hit. And so retail, there's always been a spotlight on retail. My whole career, I've always heard, oh, retail's dead, development's dead, it's not going to happen, it's all over with. And it always bounces back. I mean, last year, 11% of retail sales were online, I think, in 2019, if I'm not mistaken, and it'll probably go up to 20%. Maybe it's there right now, given COVID, but that still means 80% of bricks and mortar. I mean, so at the end of the day, there's always going to be bricks and mortar retail. It's not going to die. It's not a death sentence, but the world is changing, and retail is having to adapt, and they're fantastic. They're even better at developers, in my view, at adapting to the consumer, needs and wants. So I still think these experiential environments are critically important to produce, and they will be going forward because that's what the consumer wants. And so that's my point of view, and that's what I see.
Great, thank you. Yeah, Cindy, that's a good question. So we went through a whole period where it was experience, right? So that E word has now converted to essential, essential business. So will we see a tenant mix shift in our properties? And, what are you seeing there? And then I had thrown out to you guys this morning a topic of dwell time. We also just came from a whole period of, we wanted the consumer to hang out at our property, because the more they hung out at our properties, the more they spent, the higher the retail sales, the higher the rent. So are we going to go away from dwell time? Do we want the consumer to come in and out? So what's your take on experiential versus essential, dwell time versus in and out?
Well, I think if you lived in the retail world for a while, we kind of got fatigued with that word experiential, to the point where it was the only word everybody was using with regards to how you positioned your property, how you developed. And I think we now are going to enter a whole new vocabulary. And I think we need to take a step back and realize that retail's always been a discovery experience for people. We want to come in and discover, whether we're touching it, we're smelling it, we're eating it. It's all about the senses and how we navigate retail. I definitely think that there's still the experiential component to it, and we're going to have that weaved into everything that we are doing. The biggest challenge I foresee is that we're about to enter a psychological change. And it's a partnership that's going to have to be done with landlords, retailers, and the consumer. And that is, we have to get to a safety point mentally that we all want to re-engage. We want to go back into that discovery retail experience. And I don't know that the playbook is there yet. We're figuring this out somewhat as we go, and the adaptation that landlords are going to have to engage in with regards to their properties, making them feel safe. The retailers are going to have to make the experience feel safe. The restaurants are going to have to make you feel comfortable in close proximity. So, I think that this is now a truly team effort for retail to climb back up to where it really was seeing the tremendous growth. And there's a responsibility, and I talked to a lot of landlords, and I don't mean this disrespectful, but everybody kind of got fat and happy and lazy, and it was everybody else's problem to figure out, right? If the retailer was failing, it was the retailer's problem. If the landlord's center was kind of well, it is what it is. I don't think we have that luxury right now. I think it's a three-legged stool going forward that everybody has to work together to create a new discovery experience for the consumer. And if we do it, we'll get everybody back. But if we segregate it again, it's going to be a long haul back.
So I'd like to add something to that. So I think that we as landlords, and we all have a responsibility for sure, but I don't think people are on the sidelines. I think Chuck talked about his experience. We're seeing everybody at the pool. People are going out and people are having experiences. I agree that the word experiential is way overused, but I can tell you, I'm based in Chicago, and the comedy clubs and the music scene and all of that stuff, it's all happening, and it's happening with new rules, right? Geared towards, maybe more distancing. Those of us who are pent up and want to go to the movies, in spite of the virus, I don't think people are sitting at home waiting for a vaccine. They want to get out there. They want it to feel safe, but they're getting out there now. And so government is actually holding, I'm not saying rightly or wrongly, I'm not judging, but government is holding back a lot of our retailers because you can only have, like we know in Orlando, 50%, right? So government is actually controlling the amount of capacity. It's not because consumers are not going out there. So I agree also as landlords that we all need to pivot. We all need to make sure that it feels as safe as possible for the consumer and help our retailers who are also by necessity doing that anyway, because otherwise they won't get people in the doors. So I just think that the world is out there now. I don't think that this is someday. I think the world is out there now.
Well, I think you're right. I went out Friday night. Myself and my sister went out to dinner Friday night, and my son, who's 20, and his girlfriend went out. And we're in South Florida. I know it's a different market, but both restaurants we went to separately had 30-minute waits. And it was 50% capacity in dining. Everyone was wearing masks, but I loved to see that. I just booked a trip to Orlando to Disney for the end of September. And, unlike the Wall Street Journal today, who said that the domestic travel in China, the headline is China theme park sector booms. And I'm going, oh, interesting, right? And the theme parks in China are not charging. I can tell you that Disney's charging. We're going to go to all 4 parks, and they have definitely, you're not allowed to do park hopper passes. You have to make a reservation. So I know which day we're going to Epcot, which day we're going to Magic Kingdom, etc. And we're staying at the Margaritaville in a cottage, 4-bedroom cottage. So I think that Disney is probably the cleanest and safest they'll ever be, and we won't have the lines that we're used to. So, but I do think, like Ivy said, people are going out. Chuck, I love that you're on the reopening task force. So you think that we possibly are going to have a vaccine by Q1, and then will we reopen 100% in Central Florida?
I think we will have a vaccine probably at the end of this year, no later than Q1. What's interesting about this whole thing, and I've been glad to be on the reopening task force because I was part of keeping Central Florida open and not closed. What really stinks through all this is we are writing a playbook as we go. Nobody really knows. Like when I was in California last week, you couldn't have indoor dining. Then the governor just this week said they could go to 25% indoor. People are going to look back in this years from now and say, was that wrong? Was that right? Should we have really done this? Should we not have done this? Because politicians, people like me, committees, task force, are all making up these rules out of fear because no one really knows to the extent of what the virus is. You heard yesterday. And so did we go too far? Did we not go far enough? It feels like we really went too far. And that'll be determined sometime in the future, of course, after the election, because now it's become completely political. And I think you're going to see a drastic shift in the tides after the election, whoever wins the election. But I think it's going to change after that. But it's being used, unfortunately, as a tool right now to drive America apart. It's being used as a tool to hurt retailers. It's been used as a tool, just it's part of a political process. So I think we're going to see a dramatic change after the election. I think you're going to see the vaccine come out after as well. And I think a large percentage of the population will be afraid to take it, but a large percentage of the population will want to take it and put this behind us. Like I said earlier, I don't think this is who we are as a people, and I think we will go back to normal. The one thing we haven't mentioned, and Ralph, you were talking about it a little bit, we're doing a lot of development going forward right now. What we've seen, probably the worst part, is our lenders. our lenders they're just scared. They're scared of developers who default. Our loan to values, our loan to cost have significantly changed. I was on the phone with a lender this morning that's afraid of doing a 55% loan to value on a Publix center. I'm like, come on, Publix is bigger than you guys are. They've never not made a payment ever. And there's on the credit side of the world, there's a lot of fear. And we experienced that after 9/11, we experienced it in 2009, and we're experiencing it again now. So we've got significantly more capital in our deals that, hopefully we can refinance out of those deals in a year and a half and recover some of our capital. But the lenders are probably, the most difficult for developers right now, just because the capital requirements. And as far as our tenants, we're seeing the same thing. We own a restaurant. It's just a side business we have, and we're seeing the sales every week tick up and up. They went from going down, from close to 20% to 40 to 50. Now we're back to about 65% of our sales, and we'll see that climb as time goes on. The other thing, which I monitor daily, is we're seeing the percentage of positivity cases test significantly. They're the lowest they've been. And the cases in Florida have gone way, way, way down. Orange County has gone way, way down. So I think people are starting to get more confidence as they're seeing those cases come down and as we're nearing a vaccine. So, I think we've been through the hardest part of this. I think we're on the way out, but that story is still yet to be told completely.
Yeah, there's obviously, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I just wanted to chime on the point Chuck made, because I think it's important. On the lender side, one of the things that our investment sales teams and our capital teams are saying really throughout the whole process as COVID's evolved these last several months is that a lot of the single tenant deals have continued to move forward out there on the investment sales side, but the real holdback right now on the Publix anchored type shopping centers, grocery anchored shopping centers, is on the lender side, and higher scrutiny of those balance sheets. So as that gets figured out and loosens up, I think that's going to be an important contingency as we move forward to see things start to open up, not just here in Central Florida, but really, across the full footprint of Florida and the Southeast. And one other note that I would agree with Chuck and Ivy on is that, from the very beginning, one of the things that was unique about this whole scenario is we were, be it tenants, landlords, lenders, we were all kind of in this together and figuring it out as we go in unprecedented time. So I have noticed a willingness to work together from landlords we work with who have maybe got a 90-day forbearance from their lender and being able to pass that along to certain tenants. As Chuck said, each tenant and each center is different on a case-by-case basis, but there's been this willingness to figure it out, that it was nobody's fault. And I do believe that people are out there and now living with this and saying, hey, whether it's put my mask on and move forward, as many of the panelists have said, right or wrong, nobody really had the roadmap for what this meant. But I think people are now to the point of saying, whatever it is, we need to move this thing forward and follow the guidelines and keep businesses moving forward. So that's been an overwhelming response that I've seen really across all of our businesses and markets.
I'll add one thing is on a positive note. Taylor's sitting here with me. We probably have 100+ deals in the pipeline of tenants who want to move forward. We're delivering a lot of space in Q3 of next year. And when I say tenants, all across the board, from Portillo's to Wendy's to McDonald's to Chase Bank, we've got tons and tons of deals, and we're really seeing very, very little pullback because they're seeing that it's going to be positive down the line. I was on a webinar with Goldman Sachs last week, and the CEO of Blackstone made a great comment and said, at the time you think you shouldn't put a shovel in the ground is the time you should put a shovel in the ground, because we will be out of it by the time you get these things built. But on the lender side, they're conservative and they don't look at it, well, when this delivers, what's the likely economy going to be at that point in time? And that's what we're looking at. We do a lot of apartments, we do mixed use, we do kind of everything across the board. So we're actually excited for what's going to happen toward the end of next year.
Yeah, so the whole fast food industry, right? The ones that were prepared, the retailers and the restaurants that were prepared with apps for curbside pickup are the ones that, according to the sales that I'm reviewing in my portfolio, are succeeding significantly, to the point that now you see the Paneras and the Chipotles of the world expanding only with drive-throughs, right? And Starbucks still has not opened their cafes, continuing with their drive-throughs and curbside pickups. So everyone is talking about the value increase to have a drive-through. So Ralph, what do you think about that as a developer? You know, values for drive-throughs higher? How much higher? You know, I think the audience would love to know what all of our collective predictions are as far as the value of drive-throughs. Obviously, it's market specific, but if there's a low supply and a high demand, how much higher can values of drive-throughs go if the restaurants are thinking they're going to do 30 or 40% more in sales?
All right, I'll try to answer that. But first, I have to comment on the construction lending side, because the projects that I'm working on, they're very large, they're very intense. We're not seeing a major problem with finding lenders who want a loan. Their underwriting has changed dramatically, but that happens all the time. Every time we come out of a recession or whatever, there's always a change in that. But you know, construction lending is balance sheet lending at the end of the day. It's all about the sponsor. It's all about the sponsor. And yeah, there has to be an exit strategy, but it's the strength of the sponsorship. Because pre-leasing, if you wait to pre-lease something, you're never going to get anything built right now, unless you're doing a one-off deal. So that's kind of what we're seeing. So it goes beyond just pre-leasing. It's the whole package. But anyway, as it relates to drive-throughs, so I happen to be working on a project where the zoning will not permit a drive-through because they want it to be a town center and they don't want to have drive-throughs. I don't know what's going to happen at that situation. Like if we were able to bring Starbucks, would they change their mind because of the brand? I've seen that happen. So drive-throughs in mixed-use projects, which is primarily what I do, is sort of a no-no. So if you have peripheral land and you can do drive-throughs, I think it's the only way to go. However, I have seen drive-throughs in mixed-use projects, you know, sparingly. You know, it just kind of depends on. It has to be an end cap. You have to have the availability to, you know, have that drive-through. But everybody wants that. And now this post-COVID situation, or I guess we're in COVID, this whole pickup situation. I mean, that's going to really shed some interesting light on things. But you know, I think having a drive-through, a restaurant having the ability to have people come and pick up their product is huge. But I think you can also do it without having theoretical drive-through, like a traditional drive-through like you would normally see, because I think you can still do it. So yes, it definitely creates value.
Ralph, do you think construction costs are going to drop because of labor, or is it going to increase because of the lack of supply?
Let me tell you something. This is a loaded question because my clients, yeah, that's who, you know, I work with people who typically don't do this stuff, and they're all like, oh, we're going to be able to save money now because all these contractors are going to be looking for work. The exact opposite has happened. In fact, we've held back on some stuff because lumber prices have gone through the roof and construction materials have gone through the roof. And God help you if you're trying to get appliances for an apartment complex. I mean, you know, you got to wait like months. So in one of my projects, we're putting in whatever appliances they have in stock. They might be black, orange, blue, green. We don't care. We're putting them in just to get the apartments leased, and then we'll come back and put the stainless steel units when you can. Me personally, at my own home, my wife and I have been waiting for a refrigerator for 2.5 months now, and there's no end in sight. We don't know when we're going to get the darn refrigerator. So I don't buy that. No, I don't think there's you can ask the rest of the panel, but from my point of view, we're in the middle of building. We're not seeing anything. In fact, we're seeing a little bit of the opposite.
Beth,
Or, you know, one second, Chuck. In Gainesville, I'm sure they would all love the blue and orange appliances.
Of course, yeah, it works out perfectly. Yeah, exactly.
Go ahead,
well
Chuck.
done. Well done, Beth.
We've seen a
So
little
Ralph,
bit of.
basically it's because it's supply constrained. It's basically because it's supply constrained, right?
Right. That's the issue. We've seen both. We're buying out about $1 billion of projects right now. In one project, we were able to bring in 17 million less than our January bid. So, we got a significant buyout savings on that, but that was mainly on the labor side. The problem you're seeing with lumber right now, we've seen a huge spike. We've got 8 apartment complexes going, and the average apartment complex, the lumber price has gone up about $1.5 million per project. The problem with that is the lumber mills closed down March, April, May. So now the lumber mills are opening back up. So right now there's a shortage of supply of lumber. So we're actually holding off on buying some lumber packages until the mills are up and running, and we expect those prices to come back down, which is the same with appliances that are made overseas. Those factories had shut down, they're ramping back up. So if you have to buy right now some of those commodities, you're going to see price hikes in them. But what we will see and what we are seeing is we're seeing some of the labor prices come down because projects have been shelved. Almost every hospitality project in the United States has been shelved. There's very few hotels going. Road projects have increased because it's been less traffic, so they've accelerated them. So it really depends on what stage, where you're buying, what project you're doing, what the type of project is. I've noticed on our shopping centers that we're doing, we're realizing maybe a 2 to 3% savings on them. They're not huge, but 3% on a $30 million job, it's $1 million. So it's tough. I mean, our best buyouts were probably the ones we did in June and July because we hadn't felt the effect of lumber prices and drywall prices going up. But today in today's market, we're feeling that, and using price indexing on some of these things.
Beth, I think this is really a good segue into what I'm experiencing with my tenants, representing everybody from nationals to franchisees to local. And they're all waiting for the COVID discount in negotiating rents. And I keep saying, last time I checked, that COVID discount doesn't exist because this has been a very short window of change. And, developers don't get to rewrite their underwriting based on COVID. And I think that that's a really hard conversation to have with everybody that's trying to re-enter the market and fill the 2021 pipeline. There's an expectation, and I'll tell you, Florida specifically, our dirt is not going to get cheap. It's always been expensive. It's going to stay expensive. It's the cost of doing business in Florida. Central Florida is probably one of the top tiers for development, and that just translates into rents that are reflective of developers' basis and construction costs. So there is a disconnect still happening with the national, retailers that really still have a high expectation of a COVID discount. And I don't know about Ralph, Chuck, but I haven't felt your love as a representative of tenants yet, because it's just not gonna be there, I don't think.
Well, and why would there
has to be a lot more transparent. There has to be a lot more transparency going forward, more than there has been, because every time this happens, there has to be a lot of transparency. And I think you said it earlier, Cindy. Developers, retailers, other tenants. I mean, it has to be a partnership. It really can't be the old school way of doing development, which it hasn't been, quite frankly, in a long time. So it's a partnership to get things done because there's expectations out there, and some of them are just false expectations. The world has not really changed in that direction. It's actually gone the other way, which is kind of interesting from my perspective.
And I think that understanding sales, understanding uses, we monitor sales very closely. Most of my restaurants, I've got a sub shop that's local 7 locational chain is double what he was pre-COVID. Thank God he has an app, no drive-through. I've got a local ice cream guy who's back above COVID now. Home improvements, lighting stores, carpet stores, they're doing fine. The victims in my portfolio, and just like Chuck, I have more LOIs going now than probably in the last 10 years. The activity is there, and I'm not giving any COVID discounts per se, but the victim in my portfolio will be the hair salons, the individual hair salons. I think salon suites might be the winners. I also think that gyms, I think health is going to become a new, I used to not work out as much as I have now, started during COVID, and I joined a larger gym versus a smaller gym I was a member of before. The gyms that are taking into account the safety and the cleanliness and the sanitization are very active. And I think, there was a lot of negativity. Are our gyms going to make it? I think that boutique gyms and gyms that pay attention to their customers' concern for safety because of the new, desire to have good health will be the winners. So that's what I thought. I think, go ahead, Ivy.
I was going to say, we had 24 fitnesses, and the line of fitness tenants to take their place is huge. The amount of LOIs we have going on for that. I think that absolutely the home goods, sporting goods, anything related to buying a home, anything related to what Beth just said, physical activity, all of those are on fire. Again, they don't have restrictions the same way restaurants do, or gyms in certain places as well. Like again, we talked about Central Florida at 50%. You still have California and North Carolina who you can't open up a gym. So it's going to be a story of the have and have nots for the retailers that are able to either knock it out of the park or barely make it. It's going to be exaggerated, I think, the wins and the losses.
And Ivy, you'll know, and other landlords, you got to call the bluff on some of these tenants. Like 24-hour fitness is one of my centers, and 2 years they wanted half rent and this and that, and I said, just get out. I said, get out.
Right.
And
we
now
locked them out in Texas. Yeah.
Yeah, and now they're paying us full rent again. They accepted the lease. They're paying us because we knew it was a good location. I just had last week a restaurant tell me in one of our centers, he's like, well, I can't pay rent. I need more deferrals. And I got all of his sales. His rent's $9,500 a month, and he's doing $100,000 a month in sales. I'm like, absolutely, you're going to pay us. And so,
yeah,
a lot of them take.
I was going to say that's a biggie. We check occupancy health ratio costs big time, because we'll have somebody tell us, well, gee whiz, we went from 10 to 15% occupancy costs, and I'm like, okay, so we're not giving you a rent break. If you're telling me your health ratio is now 85%, like, we'll help you. But there's a lot of retailers who are just distressed because they're not doing the same amount of money they were doing, but they're still healthy. They may not be as healthy as they were before, but they're still healthy and they need to pay rent.
Well, we've had some, and I won't mention the names, but some very big national retailers and restaurants come to us and tell us we had to give them a 90-day deferral, spread out over next year at landlord's expense, at our health. And where they absolutely had the capital to do it, but they would use the word, we want to preserve our capital. But when they say that, they're doing it at the expense of our capital. And
right.
We have relationships with them, and there's a balance. We have to do that if we want next year when we're ready to build a new center. And well, remember when we asked you for that and you said no? Well, we're going to go somewhere else. So we've had to work with people who really didn't even need the work. And but the good thing is, I think all of our deferrals throughout our entire company are over. I think our last one might be October 1st before we get paid again, but essentially I think most of them have burned off by September 1. And like everybody's talked about, we're seeing things, at least here in Florida, things are coming back to life, not where they were, but they're absolutely getting much better.
And now we'll see the COVID language go into all the leasing, all the pre-leasing, yes. Just like we had the Great Recession language, now we're going to have the COVID clause that we'll have to deal with. So that's just part of what you deal with.
in every Starbucks lease now.
That's one
Yeah, there were
point.
some landlords. There were some landlords down in South Florida that resisted the some of the COVID language with a certain coffee company, and a certain Mexican restaurant company has taken over some of those deals.
Mm.
And
COVID,
Beth,
COVID language will usurp the kick-out language.
on one point, Beth, you were making on the health side being a winner here. I think our teams are also seeing the medical moving off campus, the MedTel. That was already a trend that was prevalent pre-COVID, and that doesn't seem to be slowing down, be it urgent care or primary care centers. I think that's another winner in the space of being able to take opportunity as landlords look to re-tenant, maybe upgrade in certain aspects in the next 12 months. I think you'll continue to see that trend as well.
2 years ago, speaking and saying that our shopping centers are filled with the 4 F words: food, fun, fitness, and physicians. And I think the only one that's questionable there will be the fun. Like, how do trampoline stores and these competitive socializing, the axe throwing, the escape rooms, I think there will be a need for it. I think that people want to socialize. They like the competition, the gamification of it. The question is will those operators be able to provide a secure, clean environment? Right now, I'm going to Disney. I think it's probably the cleanest it's ever going to be or ever has been. But going forward, we'll have to see how the retailers adjust. So I want to ask a question for you guys in Central Florida. Are you seeing the crazy influx of New Yorkers to the Central Florida market like we are down here? I'm hearing from residential real estate agents that houses and apartments and condos are being bought sight unseen, 3 bids, like crazy. Is that going on in Central Florida?
Let me tell you a story. We are building a St. Regis hotel and 69 condos on the west coast of Florida in Longboat Key. And our condos start off, the cheapest one you can buy is $2 million, the most expensive is $20 million. And I was going to put that the sales of the project on hold until Thanksgiving. And my broker down there, she told me, Chuck, we got to do them now. Let's sell. So we put them on the market 3 weeks ago Friday. We sold $157 million of condos in 3 weeks. Our very first one we sold was $20 million. And what happened was in March, all the snowbirds that would normally go back home up north decided they're not going back home. They didn't like the COVID. They didn't like the riots. They didn't like everything that was happening. And so we're selling like crazy. I mean, it's just, we're selling 1 or 2 condos a day that are averaging $5 to $7 million, per condo. So, we just hit 50% sold out today, and we expect the project will be 100% sold out in the next 2 or 3 weeks. So it's amazing what people are doing. They want to be in this market. And just yesterday, I was in Austin, Texas for 4 days. And you talk about a market that's just terrible. I mean, homeless people everywhere. They've had riots. As a matter of fact, we left Capitol Grill, and our waiter told us, he said, be careful on your way back to the Four Seasons. He said 2 people were shot in front of the restaurant last week and killed. And they're like, so people want to get out of those environments. And I told my CFO who was with me, I said, I really love living in the area we live in Central Florida, because it's just a really nice, safe market. You don't feel like you have to go to Capitol Grill and worried about if you're going to get shot when you leave. And so, that's driven our demand too, is that we just don't have the problems here that have been experienced, not only COVID, but, through the violence elsewhere. And our real estate market, we're building Ritz-Carlton residences here. We're killing it with that. We're building a residential community. We've sold out of the residential community, and we've got the St. Regis Hotel, and our residence is there, and we're selling like that. So yeah, it's an absolute booming market in residential here.
They say population cures all ills, right? So we are all blessed to be living in Florida, well, except for Ivy, Chicago resident.
At our project at Celebration Point in Gainesville, we have a townhome community in the residential component. It's our only for sale portion of the project. And my son actually is the agent. He works for CP Realty, but what he's telling me is almost everybody who's interested in these units are coming from out of the area. There's an exodus from Miami, from what he's telling me. There's a lot of people from Miami. He's getting people from Illinois, people from New York, people from the Midwest. They have business with the UF related education and health, but Gainesville is just very attractive place for these people to want to live, both from education for their kids and just a good environment. So we are seeing some exodus from other areas.
I won't debate with you right now that Gainesville is an attractive place. You can see my garnet walls behind.
Taylor's a Gator.
Chuck, were you going to comment, or Kurt? One of you popped in there.
I was just going to chime into that point. I mean, similar to Ralph and Chuck, like what we see in other business lines, multifamilies not slowing down, or mixed use projects as well. One of the things specific to the folks moving in that you mentioned, and won't mention the name, but a client we work with closely on the office side and primarily in the home building business has told us, they're going gangbusters and not slowing down at all. So I do think there's something to that. Just like we've talked about certain retailers going through this, there's going to be winners and losers. I think certain states and certain cities obviously are going to be winners and losers when we look back on this. And I do think that influx from some of the other markets, that Florida as a whole and Texas from a standpoint of taxes and cost of living and some of those things are two states that, we certainly live it here in Florida, but I continue to hear that from folks in New York and northeastern markets in particular, that Florida is a prime option to move down.
Well, and if I could just add, even on the retail side, I'm hearing we're called the safe harbor, if you will, for retailers, that because we're pro growth, we're pro business, our tax structures are good. A lot of retailers feel safe that if they're going to test a concept and even a modified concept, this is probably the safest state to do it, because we do have a mix and are very diverse of all kinds of palettes that come in from the Northeast, the West, and it's just a great testing ground, but it's just also a safe harbor. We know how to do stuff good in Florida, whether it's tourism, travel, experiences, people feel comfortable when they come to Florida. And I think that's our safeguard, if you will, going out of COVID. They're still going to come.
Speaking of safe harbors, fill us in, the audience in, on downtown business districts in Central Florida. Downtown business districts in South Florida, 80% of the office worker is not back. So any retail in those downtown markets are significantly impacted, but our suburban markets are thriving because of that. Are you guys seeing that in Central Florida?
We are. I would say that mirrors what you're experiencing in South Florida. I think that probably resonates across the state. Our CBD was not super robust in pre-COVID, and now in the middle of COVID, it's taken a hard hit. Restaurants, our day population is what supported most of the sales. The suburban markets with the flee to home, if you will, have boomed with regards to, hey, I still want to go and get my coffee in the morning. I have to have some type of routine outside of my four walls. So I think they have been the winners. As Ivy pointed out, the haves are going to be the ones that are in the suburban markets. The have-nots or the CBDs that have to get people back in the offices. And if they don't, then it'll just be another reset of tenant mix and conversation.
So before we go to questions, my last comment or question to the whole panel is, I really think Christmas and the holiday season, I'm predicting, because, I think, if you put it out there, it happens, that we've had a lot of people not spend a lot of money for 6 months. They've not gone on vacations. They've not gone to Disney. They haven't sent their kids to sleepaway camps. They haven't spent money on gas. They haven't spent money on back to school uniforms. It goes on and on and on. And they're tired. They haven't done graduation celebrations, birthday celebrations. I am banking and betting on the parents that are going to, out of guilt, overbuy for their kids for Christmas. And I'm hoping that that happens, because we all know that if we have a good Christmas holiday, a good holiday season, that helps spur, and the election will be over, whatever the result, that will be behind us. What do you all think about that?
Beth, I think you may be slightly off. I think people have been shopping. Every day I come home, it's like I should decorate the front door like a Christmas tree, because there's always Amazon boxes by the front door. And I always take a picture and send it to my daughter and say, Merry Christmas. I think everybody has been shopping, just a different way. Yes, I think we're going to have a good holiday season, but I think people are still shopping.
Yeah, I do too. And I also think it's going to be impacted by those who don't have jobs, right? We're still going to have a depressed employment. So yes, people who have, again, the have and have nots will spend, whether or not that overcomes the people who are not spending, right? Soft goods are way down. Again, it'll depend. It'll depend.
Yeah, I would say it's all about retail inventory. What's in the store? If it's stagnant and we have not seen a reset of fall into Christmas season apparel, toys, whatever, if that experience isn't joyful, which we all look forward to the holidays to be one of the most joyful periods, if it's anticlimactic when you walk into the store and you can't really find anything, there's going to be this, yin yang of, gosh, I want to spend, but this is stale inventory. And that's not really the retailer's fault. It's a supply chain issue that we're have to work together. I'm hoping that everybody's working behind the scenes right now on that supply chain so that they can be beefed up come, October 1 going in. But because I agree with you, Beth, I think there's a lot of pent up demand. Like, let's get it going again. Let me feel, retail again. So we'll see.
I'm going to put all my Christmas decorations up in my shopping centers in October. I'm going to try to push this. But I also think that there will be a lot of retailers that are hanging out that are going to eke through Christmas and the holidays and not do as well. And then I think for Q1 bankruptcies, there will be an uptick. So I do think that we may have that hangover as well. So, keeping our fingers crossed. Okay.
Beth, I just want to say one last thing, because really haven't talked about it. I mean, that's the safety in our centers, whether they're urban centers, suburban centers, or on the periphery. I think what's going to drive a lot of people, back to bricks and mortar shopping. I think there's a segment of the population that's just nervous and they don't maybe feel safe in some environments because of what's going on. And not to get political, but I do think that there's going to, especially in these large enclosed mall areas and whatnot. I mean, I know that even in our project, I mean, safety is a primary concern, along with health and and those kinds of things. So I think people, they're going to get out. I mean, nobody wants to stay trapped in their house. And I agree with you, Cindy. I mean, the holidays are invigorating. They're usually a time of joy, and they bring out, sort of a different feeling in people. And I think people are going to be looking to get out. As you said, the elections will be over, and hopefully all the politics will be out of the way, although they won't be. I think it's incumbent upon the landlords to communicate that, this is a safe, and besides being a clean environment, it's a safe environment, and you're welcome to come here and spend the time.
So let me ask the panel, for the properties in Central Florida, are you guys adding security, like more than you had before?
We
have not. We haven't had to. I think that malls might have, because as you're restricting certain uses, et cetera, but for the strips, we were fully prepared at the end of March to do all that stuff, and we have not had to at all. We've had marches that have gone by certain of our properties, but even in those were unique moments when the marches were there, and we've had security staff up just in case, and those have also been non-events.
Yeah. There was a protest at the Sawgrass Mills Mall. I have a shopping center on the perimeter of that, and I just strongly urged all of the tenants to put up their hurricane shutters, which they did, and there was no event. So, but I was not going to hire security. What were they going to do? I just didn't think it was going to be productive. Okay, so let's go to some questions. So Universal, this is from David Erickson. Universal announced 1,000-person layoff. How does that affect this fall business? And do you all predict that more layoffs are ahead in the Central Florida area? Cindy, what do you think?
Well, I think that the CEOs of those parks are having some really tough discussions right now. I know as of just August 26th, and Chuck, you probably better than I, the governor was speaking to those CEOs trying to push their capacity rates up, but they are again having tough decisions on a profitability side. Unless they've got to bring in more staff, they got to get more operational components together to get that capacity, and does it translate into an ROI that makes sense to them? So I think that that's a real tough question to answer right now, because they're driving it. They have to decide if they want to increase capacity, which brings back the jobs that prevent the furloughs. I know, as Chuck said, the Marriotts of the world, the Hiltons, they are continuing their furloughs probably into first quarter, just because we haven't seen the uptick in travel and tourism that they need to make it profitable. It's not that they don't want to, it's just not profitable yet. So
well, that's the problem. It's not that they're being, it's really, the governor could say you could be 100% open. I don't think it'll make a difference right now. It's just like restaurants. It's not that we're limited at 50% capacity. It's that the public is unwilling to go back to the way it used to be at this point in time. People are not going to travel by airplane. They're not going to go to conventions like us. We're all in this. We're not meeting together. CEOs of big companies are not going to send all their employees on commercial airlines to go in a convention center and take risk of COVID. They're not going to, a lot of people aren't going to travel here with their families. So that's why you're seeing the local lakes and beaches and everything flourishing, because people are traveling in their car nearby their homes. And until that travel opens back up, the theme parks are going to continue to lose money. They're going to continue to do, whether it's layoffs or whatever they have to do to try to increase their profitability margin. And they'll have to keep making those decisions until, unfortunately, the vaccine comes out. There's going to be small shifts, but there's not going to be radical shifts until that comes out. So I think that industry is going to continue to feel harm, along with hotels, the hospitality. That whole sector is going to have problems until then. I just saw on my computer screen, came up a moment ago, that breaking news, Orange County steps back from convention center expansion due to lack of financing. And they have lack of financing because they're not collecting the tourist taxes right now. So, it's gonna stay there until we get through this.
Speaking of taxes and municipalities, I wanted to say this earlier when Ralph mentioned about certain municipalities don't like drive-throughs. I have a project that I'm in the middle of developing, and prior to COVID, there was a huge prohibition on gas. And I called my land use council and I said, what do you think about us going back to this municipality? And he said, pre-COVID, 0%, post-COVID, 60%. And we went and met with staff and the mayor and they approved it. So wow. The municipalities are looking for income. So for all the audience, if there was a no before, there might not be a no going forward. I also saw today in the news that United Airlines is waiving all ticket change fees going forward. They said permanently, which was a $625 million line item in 2019 for them. So, and that the industry, as we all know, is down 70%. So there's United Airlines taking action by waiving ticket change fees. Well, when we were booking at Disney or at Margaritaville, my sister was handling the reservations and they wanted us to pay in advance with no refund. I said, we're not doing that. So she got a supervisor on the phone and said, really? This is a 4-bedroom cottage and you don't want to, we want to have it fully refundable if we decide, I think, a week in advance if we're going to cancel. And the supervisor changed the no refund rule to, giving us a full refund. So I do think companies have to adapt. For the consumers who want to take action or who want to do things but are a little concerned about safety and cleanliness.
Well, that's the difference in enterprise versus governmental enterprise, because people like that are doing the right things, where Seminole County wants to raise impact fees right now. And I was quoted in the paper last week saying, how crazy is that? Development's having issues, we have growth issues, and they want to raise impact fees right now. Just stupid. It's crazy.
Well, government doesn't want to, they don't want to lay off people, right? And they're, all of our towns and municipalities are faced with, they're going to have to be faced with severe cuts, because where's the money going to come from, right? So not saying it's right or wrong, but yes, that's the way they're dealing with it, so that they don't have to lay off anybody, but it's going to inhibit development. It's not going to encourage development.
Great.
Okay, we have a question from Brandon Wolf. He would like to know the presenter's opinion on the Daytona Beach market in the next 6 to 12 months. We
have 4 projects in Daytona Beach, 3 projects in Daytona Beach. Daytona Beach is it's when you do a project in Central Florida, you realize the difference in an A+ market versus going to a B market. Everything in Daytona it's a little bit slower. I mean, it's not a bad market, it's just not an on fire market. And I think Daytona is still a little bit early in the game. Yeah, I agree with Taylor on that. We're getting deals done, but not nearly the pace. I mean, where we have 100+ deals we're working on here in Central Florida, we got a handful of deals we're working on there. So it's definitely more work to get deals done. We're building 2 apartment complexes in Daytona Beach also by the Tomoka Town Center. And where our lease up here in Central Florida is usually 8 to 9 months to fully lease it up, we're expecting we're going to be 14 to 16 months to do a full lease up there. So it definitely isn't the same as Central Florida.
Yeah, I think from a tenant perspective, you just have to put it in a priority perspective going into 2021. The real estate directors that I'm engaged with are now relooking every market and combing through the analytics and the data points to say, is there enough sales potential there to go there versus another B market? And so it's not that they've become less valuable. It's just these are business decisions that every retailer is now going, let's prioritize markets for 2021. If we only can do 5, where are we going to go? And how are we going to spend our money? And we may have to revisit it in 2022. And it is just what it is.
Yeah, because I would chime in. Normal times for Daytona, part of the question is, can you pull from all the inbound traffic coming through Orlando to make it make sense? And certainly I would agree with what Chuck just said. It's going to delay that even more when we're 60% down in kind of the inbound tourism traffic over the second quarter due to COVID. It's just going to hurt Daytona.
Speaking about analytics and traffic and how important it is, and how for most of us on this call, we've been dependent for decades of our careers on demographics based on 10-year-old census data. Besides me, are any of you all using geofencing to show mobile traffic data?
Absolutely. I think it's the best tool out there because it's real information. I mean, look, you can't pull concentric information, 3, 5, 10 mile. I've done this a million times with students. You can go and pull all this information, but it's not the real deal. I mean, you need gravity models. Like for example, Gainesville, it's a tertiary market. Why are we building this monstrous mixed use there? Well, number one, it draws from an 11 county area, okay, over 1 million people. Number 2, it's the heart and soul of North Central Florida. And most importantly, you got 70, 80,000 cars a day coming past the site on I-75 going to Central Florida. So You can't, in my view, and I've been doing this for enough time now to know, and this is the difference, by the way, between the retailers today and the retailers most of us used to deal with. You have to get out of your office and you have to get in your car and you actually have to do a little legwork. You cannot make a decision from just analytics. I mean, because the markets just don't represent those analytics often. And that's my viewpoint on it.
But so Ralph, though, and Cindy, and all of us here on the call, we've all heard from the nationals that are not touring, right? They're not touring until further notice. So there was a question from Cindy Sierra from Michigan. She says, I'm based in Michigan, but I do leasing work in Florida. My challenge is that even if a retailer is interested in the site, they will not tour. Most are saying that they won't until next year. She wants to know if the panelists have heard that. And before you answer, Ralph, I'm going to debate with you that there's a soul in Gainesville.
Hey, look, here's the thing about this not travel stuff, okay? Some people have already said it on this panel. There's a segment of the population that's going to buy into all the political rhetoric that we're all going to die from COVID and God help us, you got to wear a mask and all this other crapola, okay? And there's a segment of the population that isn't necessarily buying into all the political rhetoric. I mean, quite frankly, did anybody on this panel get flu shots? I don't. My wife does. She still got the flu occasionally, okay? So we're going to have a vaccine, and I'm sure it's going to help. But COVID virus isn't magically going to disappear and go back to China or wherever it came from. We are going to have to live with it. So if the consumers come out and they decide it's safe, it's all a psychological thing, okay? There's people that are just deathly afraid and they're not going to travel. And there are people who are getting on airplanes. A lot of my friends who travel for business, they tell me they fly Delta and they said it's just great. First of all, there's no middle seats being occupied. They love that. But the whole point is it's all mindset. And we'll see what happens here when the vaccine shows.
I'm going to chime in. The retailers have companies, and the companies, it's all about liability. So while I appreciate all the political back and forth, companies are not letting their people travel because of liability issues, right? And until there is the first big guy that allows travel, and the second big guy, it's going to be a herd mentality. We all shut down from herd mentality on the office side, and we are all going to go back to the office herd mentality. So many of the retailers are not traveling. This absolutely is true for the person who asked the question, because their corporate policies are not letting them. They're being very careful because nobody wants the insurance companies and the lawyers to point fingers at them should somebody get COVID and spread it. Now, there isn't a lot proven about when that happens, what can happen, but you do have people who are assessing risk and they're deciding if we have COVID and somebody dies and then they sue our company, what does that do to us? There is no insurance for that. There's one insurance company who's covering insurance at all for COVID, but it makes no sense to buy it because it's off the charts. So many of the retailers, again, are not traveling, much like many companies are not traveling, investment salespeople, etc., property managers, because the company's policy is not to let them yet.
I would just say on a tenant rep side, I'm dealing with a couple national concepts, and we've had to pivot and get very good at technology very quickly. And when I say quickly, I'm talking about we bought GoPros, we got cameras, and we're getting in our car and we're making videos and we're sending it to the real estate directors, and they're taking those to the REC committees, and vice versa with the landlords that have engaged in technology and done virtual tours of their properties. I think until we get through this wave of cautiousness, and it's not a right or wrong, we as brokers, we as landlords have a responsibility to embrace the technology that's out there in our toolbox. And it's not that expensive. I mean, a GoPro costs us $400, and you know, it allows us to get in our cars and take angle shots and all these things. And it satisfied the real estate director's requirement internally with their companies to say, hey, here's a site, let's at least put it in an evaluation state. And we've got as much as we can right now. So I think, you know, you just have to adapt. If you're not going to adapt, you're going to be the loser in the retail conversation with the landlord and the tenant.
And let's face it, most of these real estate directors are pretty savvy. They know the A markets, they know where they want to be pre-COVID, they know Google Earth. You know, when you present them a site plan, they're generally familiar with that market. And like we said earlier in the call, they've weeded out the B sites. They're not doing B deals right now because they don't have to. So they're doing A deals. And, you know, if you're in an A location, they know that location, whether they physically come to the dirt or not. I mean, Taylor's sitting with me, and I think you can say none of them are touring right now. Yeah.
A lot of phone conversations.
But we're still doing deals because they know the real estate. They know when we tell them we're right by Walt Disney World, which used to be a good thing, but we're right by Disney World off a future exit, and here's the property, and here's our anchor. Yeah, they're smart enough to know the deal, and so they don't physically have to be on the site. And so yeah, there's deals getting done, but no, people aren't traveling for the reasons Ivy mentioned.
All right. Well, I think that you guys, I'm sure the audience truly enjoyed all of your comments. And did we want Alicia to bring Scott back on to say goodbye to us, or are we just going to close out?
I think we're just closing out.
Awesome. Well, so Cindy,
do we know if we had any viewers?
Here we go.
Was it just the six of us?
It's okay. We had fun anyway. Yeah, we did. Cindy, Kurt, Chuck, Ivy, Ralph, thank you guys so much. So happy to have you guys on the call. Thank you, Beth, for putting up with my Gator comments. Bye, guys. Have a great week. Go spend money. Go spend money in our shopping centers.
Bye-bye.
Bye.